welcome. I thought we'd have a more packed room. How many of you were at my session yesterday? Okay. Maybe I scared everybody else off, maybe? All right, well, welcome to item 19, or how to get the most out of your item 19. This is probably one of the most important topics to cover, especially for emerging franchisors. So I'll start with just a quick intro, and then we'll kick it off. We've got a great panel here today, and everybody's got some really good, valuable information to pass on to all of you. I'd like for it to be interactive. If you have questions, ask them, interrupt us. Those tend to be the best sessions, so don't hesitate. My name's JoyAnn Kenny. I'm an attorney with FisherZucker. I've been practicing in the franchise space for over 20 years now, which is crazy to say. I started my practice with Lane when I was in law school, and I spent some time in-house, started my own practice, worked with a franchisee-focused firm for a bit, and now I've been back at FisherZucker for a little over 4 years, I think, now. So I've worked with a number of franchise systems, emerging systems, including in crafting item 19s and counseling on how to use them, what you can put in them, what you can't put in them. We grew through COVID and learned a lot through COVID and what to do with them and what hiccups there were in the process. So with that, I'm going to introduce my panel. We've got Carey, Gille, CEO with Franchise Fastlane. I'm going to let you guys talk a little bit more about what you do, just to give a quick intro. And then we have Mark Jameson, CEO of Propelled Brands. CDO.
I haven't been promoted yet.
Okay. My sloppy handwriting. Ryan Combe, co-founder and managing partner with Cornerstone Financial Partners. And Frank Milner, CEO of Tutor Doctor. So why don't we start with you, Carey? You can give a little bit more info about yourself and what you do.
Sure. My name is Carey Gille, actually. It's okay. It needs that Y on the end. Okay. It's spelled incorrectly. And I am the CEO of Franchise Fastlane. So we're what's called an FSO, a franchise sales organization. We're about not quite 7 years old. Founded the company in January of 2017. We represent 26 strong brands and help them drive their growth so that they can focus on their business. We drive their growth. And we were acquired by Southfield Capital in May of 2022. So we're about a year into a new partnership as well.
Me? All right. My name is Mark Jameson. I'm the Chief Development Officer for, I probably don't need it, for Propelled Brands. We have over 1,000 locations across 3 brands. Fastlane, which has 760 locations. My Salon Suite, which has about 300 open and another 300 sold and unopened. And Nerds To Go, which is a small emerging IT brand with about 40 locations. I've been with the company for 14 years. When I started there, we had just Fastlane, and about 2020, we became a multi-brand platform. I oversee all of the development from lead to lights on.
Awesome. All right, Ryan?
I'm Ryan Combe. I have a little company called Cornerstone Franchise Partners. We invest and help emerging brands grow. So we invest in the company and we partner with them to grow. I've started 6 different franchise concepts, almost all of them in service. We work right now primarily B2B service franchises. Intimidating panel too. Like I'll say, I'm out of place. This is like, it's always crazy when you come to franchise events because this would be like going to a tech panel and being like, oh, he's the VP for Google, the VP for Facebook, and the VP for like it's kind of crazy. But anyway, smart people up here.
Right back at you, man.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
right.
Exactly. Being too humble here. All right, and Frank?
Thanks, Ryan. My name's Frank Milner. I'm CEO of Tutor Doctor. Tutor Doctor has been around for 15 years or so. I can't believe it's that long, but man, time flies. We have 350 or so franchisees that operate around 700 territories. And we're currently operating in 15 different countries around the world. A couple of years ago, we acquired our second brand called CodeWiz, and in that brand, we currently have about 17 locations running. So, yeah, exciting journey, but I like to say we're just getting started.
All right. How many franchisors do we have in the room? Great. And any brokers? FSOs? Wonderful. And franchisees, suppliers? Okay. How many of you franchisors have an item 19? Mostly everyone. Great. Wonderful. All right.
How many have yet to sell a franchise? Okay, that's good.
So all based on company operations so far. All right, let's talk about where to start. So in the sales process, you can't talk about performance information unless you have it in your item 19. And then there are guidelines as to what you can include in there and what you can't. But in the sales process, the questions come up. There are often questions that ask for responses that maybe aren't obvious financial performance representations, like top line's an easy one. But even to get into costs as a percentage of gross and other information about the performance of the business, your hands are tied unless you have an item 19. So I know, Carey, you work with a number of brands.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what kinds of questions come up in the sales process and what types of things do you see that are effective in item 19s with the brands that you're working with?
Mm-hmm. I think you just made a very important point that I see often when we talk to new brands and considering them for Franchise Fastlane. We look at them and I'm shocked because they'll have no item 19, but then I go to the website and there's financial claims everywhere. And if you get on a call, you'll find that they'll quickly reveal how their financials are looking across the system. So this is a slippery slope, and it's so important. For us, we have an intro call, but after that intro call, we have what we call a unit economics call. So I think it's very important that item 19, we tell our brands all the time, if you don't disclose it in the financial performance review, right? It's called an FPR. If you don't disclose it, we can't say it. It is as simple as that. Only validators can speak to financials. And so we often push for a full P&L. Top line revenue, if you ask me, is not enough. We want to see a full P&L. We have one item 19 that's 45 pages long. That's a full P&L for every franchisee. Now, oftentimes when a brand comes to us, they don't have that information yet across their brands. And so we will really push them to force profit keeper or books keeping or something upon their future franchisees so they can gather this data on a regular basis. But taking it further, we need KPIs. We need to know average ticket, number of customers per year. Not because we're going to forecast for them, we cannot do that. But if you give them those tools, then they can work on their own forecast. What does year-over-year growth look like? I also really like to see a ramp. Really like to see that. So not only year-over-year growth, so let's look at 2022 compared to 2023. Instead, let's look at all of your locations and line up month 1, month 2, no matter what year they started, so we can demonstrate a ramp to break even and profitability. But those KPIs, that P&L, what about these hands that went up that said, boy, I don't have a location sold yet? You can start with corporate only. Even sometimes what we see here is we'll have franchise revenue, but we don't have expenses because we weren't gathering that accurately or requiring the right bookkeeping solution. We'll start with a full P&L for corporate only, establish a standard chart of accounts that the franchisees now need to adhere to. You just have to be very clear that you're stating this is a corporate P&L so franchisees can understand the difference.
And it's important to have that level of detail in there. It helps with sales. It helps set expectations. You want to manage these franchise prospects and what they're expecting. And without the performance information, their idea of what they can achieve might be way out of whack. So in setting the right expectation, it's really helpful to have a meaningful, detailed item 19 that's honest and representative. I know it's historical, but representative of what the model is positioning for. We have a question.
Sorry,
no, please interrupt. That's great.
as far as whenever you're saying a full P&L, are you saying, do you put averages? Like, are you saying averages, or you want like P&L for location A, P&L for location B, C? So, because we can't make them.
Really good question. We usually start at the top with a chart that is averages. So top third performance, middle third performance, bottom third. You always have to disclose bottom third. If you're disclosing top third, again, it needs to be honest and transparent. And then you want your average and you want your median every time. But then below that, we always list a full P&L for each location. I prefer to not see an average at that point. Let's see each location. Another important point that I should have made is we never call it net income, because you're just disclosing a standard chart of accounts, but every franchisee, based upon where they are geographically, might have a different set of expenses for their certain licenses or permits, or labor looks different, right? Tax rates look different. So instead, we will be very clear that this is revenue less disclosed expenses, because it will look different. So for this to help franchisees and be representative of what they could expect, we're careful in how our terminology as well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You could do that legally, so you can present a full P&L for the affiliate locations, but you have to include the performance information for your franchisees, and if it's just top level because you don't have confidence in that detail or you don't have that level of detail, then you don't need to present the same type of table. You can have different items that you're covering. Yes.
Question for you on just a follow-up question to that. If you do have corporate stores, and the corporate store, maybe you're early on in your franchise journey and supports the franchisor, maybe some personnel support, are you able to extract some of those expenses or?
So you need to be careful with that. So if you're showing a full P&L for your affiliate location, but that affiliate location does more than just operate a business that the franchisee would operate. And so maybe there's some shared employees, and so there are cost differences. You need to be very thorough with your footnotes and your explanations. And you need to be careful with adjustments that you're making. It may make sense to present the information and footnote the detail, or to make the adjustment, but you need to very clearly footnote that detail so that you're explaining. You want the picture to be not representative of what somebody's going to do, but representative of what somebody can do, yes. Even though that's not what it is, it's historical, right? But you need for it to be reasonable. You need to have a reasonable basis, and the substantiating data, make sure that you're keeping records of all of the financial reports, whatever you're basing your item 19 on. You need to have that substantiating data organized, saved, and in the system, so that if it's ever called into question, you can defend why you made that adjustment. So footnotes are super important.
Yes, Carey, on disclosed expenses, is there a pattern or a template to make sure that everyone is comparing apples to apples in that format? Because that is
You stole my next question. That's a great one. That's a great one. How do you gather the information? For emerging franchisors, it's awesome that you're in this room, because if you systematize that process and you put in play the required behavior from the beginning to send in this information through the use of software. There are great software systems now that give you access, and other things that you can do so that you can collect that information regularly from the beginning. But go ahead and share with us, Carey and Mark, what do you do? Mark, you do some creative things, right? In getting data.
We do. We're pretty detailed, and we have item 19 all the way down to EBITDA for all three of our brands. I'm a big believer that there's no other way to be selling without having that, because you don't know what conversations are happening that you can't be held accountable to. But we spend an extensive amount of time in our three brands gathering franchisees' financials. We make them aware, and what we do, we're big believers in not getting something if we're not going to give something back. So we gather that data. We really review it with franchisees and ask about expenses that don't look right if they're not staffed properly, to try to get as much normalization. We make sure they're following the chart of accounts. And we use Profit Keeper in at least two of our brands. And then the other brand, we're cautious in what we report. So for us, it is I will tell you, the first 3 months of the year, we are spending a lot of time gathering those financials, reviewing those financials, asking questions, kicking out those ones that we can't get answers on, trying to normalize as much as you can. It is a fulsome effort. But it also provides great value back to the network, because now I can break out to the network as Carey talked about, we do averages, we do mediums as you're required to do, but we do the top quartile, which everybody likes to see, and the bottom quartile because you're
you
required
have
to
to
do
do.
that. Yeah, which you weren't some time ago. I changed,
Right.
I can't remember, and I was horrified the first time we had to do it. But I will tell you,
It's
it's
our NASA regulators again.
yeah, that's right.
Legislators.
But it's helpful because I think it is, Fastlane especially is a 35-year-old chain. I've got an average unit volume of 900,000. I've got several stores doing 13 million, but we like to show the ramp of that business year 1, year 2, year 3, because I don't want somebody coming in realistically thinking, I'm going to do $900,000. I want them to come in with a realistic expectation. This may be the high point, but the ramp of stores that have opened the last 3 years looks more like this, and so it sort of normalizes it. But I would tell you that the collection of that data is important, and I'm shocked. We are a buyer of brands, and I've been in many meetings. And if you don't have an item 19, we're going to deep dive further
Yep.
when we look to buy a brand. And I can tell you that I am surprised that most that don't have an item 19, I find there's a reason for it. And it's really good information for you to have to know about your brand. And then to be able to have conversations with your franchisees and I think really know what to hone in on. The other thing we do, I'll just divert a little bit, is, as Carey mentioned, which is really important to us, is we look at the drivers of our brand and have an item 19 around them. So for Fast Signs, outside sales and
Your
having
item 19,
an outside
it's 11 pages.
11 pages.
11.
So, well, she said 25, so she's
Oh,
not me.
one that's 45.
You thought I was bad.
I just counted it, but I am tired today, but go ahead.
And so outside sales is a driver. And so we have a separate, in Fast Signs, how many stores have an outside salesperson? What's the first year? What's the second year? What's the average of it? Because that's a driver. For Salon Suite, the driver is occupancy. So we break out an item 19 on occupancy, and we break out build-out costs, because that's a big, significant investment there. For Nerds to Go, that's a reoccurring revenue model where we have a monthly reoccurring, and we break that out as well. And I would say the other part that's important, and I know there's a legal end of it, is we make sure we're 50% or better of the network before we actually put it in there. I've seen some of our competitors, that shocks me, how they have 300 units and they've got 10 in there.
You can't do
I
that.
don't think you can do. Well, they do it though, but they can't do it. You're right. But I think if you've got a sizable network or you're building to be a sizable network, getting the discipline of getting that data is something you start from day one.
Well, and you really, sooner than later, you've got to get some sort of like a CRM or a system that's gonna
Bookkeeping,
track
yeah,
everything.
profit keeper or something,
Because
yeah.
as you grow a system, changing a CRM on your franchisees will be like kidnapping their child. Like they
Yeah.
will. They
It's
will
hard.
do
It's
it
a
in the
horrible
same
battle.
light
Yeah.
As you
So
trying to
true.
destroy their entire
Yeah.
lives. And so getting something set up and tracking that stuff from the beginning is really, really important. And then you just run a report on
Yep.
the first of every
Yeah.
month, and you get to see exactly what their sales were. You can see what their labor was. You can see all kinds of stuff.
There are great tools out there to systematize all of this and to make it automated and as much as you can. And that's, now you're not relying on franchisees to email you
Yeah.
reports.
You don't have to build your own.
Right.
Right, that's
Like,
right. There's
yeah,
so
there's
many
a bunch.
providers out
Right,
there
yeah.
that
Right.
offer these types of tools.
Yeah, this,
Question for the folks that are just now starting out, when you're trying to get their item 19 together, what are some great practices up front about having a full suite of data? What are some great things early on that they can collect to present to help grow their opportunity?
Well, you want your franchisees to be reporting financials to you, and that should be a requirement. Hopefully you get it from them, and that's a discipline, and that is a have to, and I'm surprised how many networks don't. We require quarterly, but we force annually so we can review it, because you don't, and it helps us. It helps us evaluate cost of goods during COVID and when prices were going up. Then we could go back to the network and say, hey, we lost a couple of points here. You need to be raising your prices. So I think the discipline of getting those financials and reviewing them with franchisees, not only from a support function, but for you to be able to look at the health of the network. We're owned by private equity, and we couldn't do it any other way, right?
well, he makes a point there.
Contractually, go ahead.
Sorry, when he brings up private equity. And so every one of our brands has to refile an FDD usually before we begin to work together. And so that first FDD might not, the item 19 might not look exactly as we wish it did. It might not have the detail. But at that point, you write the requirement into the FDD that they have to use your vendor for gathering their data moving forward. Now, you don't name the vendor because you might change your mind from year to year as to who that is. But then you have that data in real time. You can report it, they can report it, you can react to the findings, and then when it comes time for your brand to sell to private equity, you have the information. Private equity is going to struggle with their quality of earnings report on you and review on you if you do not have this information. It's really going to be a challenge at that point.
And having a systematic chart of accounts and all that stuff, those disciplines, the earlier you start it, the way better you'll be.
And they're
at some
disciplines.
point.
You'll have the provisions in your franchise agreement. I'm sure you all have them that require it contractually. But it's so hard to get franchisees to give it. And then I get clients calling, it's, what can I do? Well, it's in your contract. You can default them. You need to get them on board with providing the information. And I think something that Mark does, and it's probably super effective in getting that buy-in, is showing the benchmarking and sharing the data. Well, you're going to benefit from this too, because you're going to be able to see where you measure up against the franchise system and what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong and what you can be doing better.
And we report that at our annual convention, at our general session. So boom, this is last year's results. Here's what we did good. Here's where the opportunities were. Giving them some results back from that they can use in their business is so important.
And
Sorry, I just wanted to add something for newer emerging brands. It's important to understand that there's a lot of flexibility that you have with putting an item 19 together. And if you don't have a big system or access to a lot of the data, I think that there is an opportunity to use some of the fundamentals in your business to build your item 19. Like, it doesn't have to be specific, revenue numbers or expense numbers, but it could be averages around those fundamentals. Mm-hmm. For us, when we started out, we spoke about the fact that we have an average closing rate, converting what we call consultations into enrollments. So we use that average across the system as part of our item 19. We use the average sales volume across the system as part of our item 19. So we were still able to give potential candidates, even when we were very small, when we didn't have a ton of data to work with, a tool that they could use to plug in their own activity that they would do in the business that would allow them to have some sort of projection for their own business. So
for new locations, like some folks raise their hands and they don't have any branches, they can be very non-specific, and as the business grows, the item
exactly
grows with the business.
Absolutely.
For sure.
So
100%.
to build on that, I started doing stuff because we're a service business, and look, everyone thinks their market is unique. That's like a joke I always say. People.
My market's different.
Yeah,
We've
well,
never heard that before.
That's how it works in Las Vegas, but it doesn't work like that in Dallas. Anyway, it does, right? That's why they have four dealerships there too. But we do, like, I break down with all of our new brands. We say these were the number of jobs we did. This was the average size of the job, the median job, and then we list average labor hours for that job. So instead of listing like an actual labor number or a percentage, we say, on a $2,500 job, it's going to be X number of labor hours, or it's going to be that. So then that people can go and they can do a little bit of research into their own market and be like, okay, well, I'm probably going to have to pay $17 an hour here. So it just helps to kind of, as you're starting out and you don't have a ton of different markets, to allow people to get a really accurate view of what labor will be, but then they can kind of assign their own costs and like closing ratios and different things like that.
That creates skin in the game for the potential franchisee.
Sure, yeah, and it kind of pushes them to do some more research on how this is going to perform in your market.
I mean, that's what I was saying earlier about I call that the drivers of the business, and we do that even with our 20-page Fastlane one. Nerds to Go, which is a small emerging brand we bought. we launched a new B2B program, and what we wanted to know was the reoccurring revenue. That was where we were moving that brand. And so when we bought it, there wasn't that information. Well, when we launched it, it didn't look that great, to be honest. And I'm a believer that if there isn't a lot of information, I want to show it all. So like you said, I showed every unit, right?
Yeah.
Some of them, frankly, sucked. And then there was the high end here, but at least candidates were not being misled. They could see it now. 3 years into it, I've got a trend, and they can see it looks better and better. But reoccurring revenue, selling endpoints in that business is a driver of the business. So I break that out separately from the EBITDA, which is sort of like breaking out labor or average ticket or any number of things that really push your business.
It's kind of nice too, like I call it the George Costanza approach. Like if you ever, when you watch the Seinfeld and George decides to do the opposite of any instinct he's ever had, he approaches that woman and he's like, "Hi, I'm George, I'm unemployed and live with my parents." She's like, "I'm Kathy, hi." Anyway, but it's like, if you, like to Mark's point, like there's gonna be data about your business or some franchisees that suck. Like that's just a fact.
Yeah.
You're gonna have franchisees that aren't good at this, or you're gonna have years or times that are bad. Like if you put that and you almost put it forward facing and you address it right off the bat, one, it puts people at ease, like that you're not trying to hide, and it gives you the opportunity to talk about why that is. And so it's actually like, it's the same thing with validation. When I've worked at big brands before, I had people that were horrible at running the business, and I would hand their name out to everybody to validate. And I called one guy Mariano Rivera because he was like the greatest closer in the whole system. But people would call him and he would just badmouth the business for like 30 minutes. And they would always call me back and be like, "If that dude's been in business for 6 years," and so it's like, so sometimes it's okay to have some of the negative stuff forward facing because it will help you actually close more deals.
And we teach in that to along those lines, not quite that dramatic, giving out the worst, but I like that approach. Right? But, you know, what we like to say is, well, when you do get somebody with bad validation, you make sure you ask them. So I notice here that outside sales is a driver of your business from the item 19. Do you have an outside salesperson? Oh, no, I don't have an outside salesperson.
Yeah.
Do I have? No, I don't do that. So you're basically not following the network. And the candidate, that clicks pretty quickly because they're like, well, I'm looking at all these things here. So.
Let's talk about how that's a good point. How you can break the data down and show those who are following the system and those who aren't following the system and the differences in performance. And so maybe you have a different model that you've launched, 2.0, and there are identifiable characteristics about this new model that sufficiently distinguish it from the former version so that you can show the performance. Well, these people participate in the pre-sales program. They use this required marketing or suggested marketing network, and then you're able to show the performance of the units that are doing what you want them to do, what you ask them to do, what you require them to do, and then you have separate disclosures for those who aren't following the model. Any questions so far? No? Oh, we're not finished yet.
I think the best example of that is the fitness industry, which you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah.
So the one we can all think of right now is Orange Theory, right, which just grew across the country. And what happened was they came out and changed things a little bit and said, franchisee, you cannot open until you have 350 signed memberships, right? And that was unheard of. So people had already paid their franchise fee. They were negotiating leases, and they had to sit there until they had 350 memberships. And the other fitness concepts sat back and went, whoa, that worked. And so even some of the fitness brands we had at the time decided to emulate that model. Not many went at 350, most of them went 150 or 200. But then what we had to do in the item 19, because you can't stop disclosing with the historical value of the system and what was happening before,
Right.
but like you said, JoyAnn, there's a 2.0. Right. So these were the historical locations. These are the locations that have opened under the new model, could not open until they had 200 members, and this is what it's looked like since then. So you could, as long as you were still holistic in your reporting, you could indicate a 1.0 and a 2.0. It was very helpful with fitness brands.
Yeah, and that's how we got to outside sales.
Sorry. If you've got enough franchisees, it is awesome to be able to say, this is what the average people in the first 12 months, or even like the average 25% in their first 12 months, you know, 2 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, whatever. I mean, that to me is really, really helpful to have. If you can even have that with your corporate business, this is what we did our first 12 months of operations.
For sure.
And on down the line, that can be helpful to paint an accurate picture of where it is. It's also nice to show the progress, because then, like to Carey's point, then people are like, oh, well, now they got their shit together. It's a good time to get in,
Yeah.
right? It's like, yeah, you missed out on all the people that lost money earlier. And you get to, that's the purpose of franchising. You get to learn from the bad beats of me and everybody else that came before you, and now you're getting in at a great time, and look at what they're doing in their first 3 months. Look what they're doing in their first 6 months.
And I think just the same, I want to, good or bad, or whatever the number is, I want candidates to come in with a realistic expectation.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody coming in thinking, well, I see in your top quartile, they're making $400,000 a year, I'm gonna come in making 400. Now, of course, we have to show it all, but I also want to show that new ramp, because I want somebody to go, oh, it's gonna take a while for me to get there. That's right.
Or
Because the
you
last
want
thing
the
I want them
person
to
to
do is
say, "I'm
open
gonna
up
show
their
you how
doors
much
and go,
smarter."
this didn't work for me, right?
Right.
Yeah, like
Right.
you want the person that's like, oh, I'll do way better than that.
Right.
Awesome. How can I help you do that? Like you want that person that sees the number and takes a competitive approach of like, I bet I can do better than that. I've got more connections than this person. I bet you like those are the people.
Yep.
That's the best thing when you have it broken out into quartiles. The person that's like, well, I don't want to talk to anybody in the bottom 50% because I'm not planning on being in the bottom 50%. That's the person you want to sell franchise to.
Right.
Sounds to me like this would also be a good vetting tool. We talk about avatars and screening applicants by spreading that data out versus just an AUV. You might be able to get some facial expressions to say this might not be a good candidate. You're smiling, JoyAnn, so you must agree.
To gauge the reactions to your,
Yeah, because we're saying here through the item 19, by spreading the data out and offering more, that we might be able to use that as also a vetting process on their reaction.
Well, look, you're not going to sell a franchise to a sophisticated business person if you don't have an item 19. Like if you sent me a franchise, and it happens, I'll have cousins or whatever that will send me. If you send me an item 19, I'm going to review it in 4.5 minutes. I'm literally going to go item 6, item 7, item 19, and that's pretty much the only thing that I care about.
And item
item
20.
20.
20. Yeah.
Sure.
I've bought enough brands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know 20. How many is
well,
close?
especially nowadays, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so to your point, if you get on the phone and somebody like starts that, I mean, you really should only get like the same 10 questions from everybody that's buying a franchise.
Yeah, but
you
I
get
think
somebody
that's-
that's asking like super random stuff that could raise a red flag. But you definitely want to get on the phone with somebody that's like, hey, talk to me about your cost of goods and why it's so much higher here, or talk to me about the cost of acquisition, or talk to me about the outside sales force, or like those are great questions.
But I think to your point, I think the other thing it does is when I get a broker inquiry or anybody says, well, I'm making $500,000 a year, okay, well, the average for X stores is 200. You know, I want somebody to go with that and go, I don't think this is what I want, right? This isn't enough for me. Yeah, I see your top quartiles there, but your average is making 200. I want them to come in with an expectation of going, look, you can make 500, you can make $1 million, do whatever you want, you can see it. But at the end of the day, if that's what you're looking to replace, you can see it took them 5 years to get there, 3 years to get there, so that there isn't this false expectation of, I just looked at the top number, and that's why it's good that we're required now to have that. Not only, and I hated it when they added, if you had the average, you had to put the median.
Median.
I didn't love that either.
The
But
high,
at the
the
end
low,
of the
the
day,
median.
it is the
Yeah.
right things to
It
do.
is.
It's
there's
the right thing to
morality
do.
behind it too, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm going to roll over my 401k that I've just saved for the last 20 years. Like, I deserve to have an accurate depiction on what's going to happen.
That's right.
Well, and Ryan,
You get
that's
blamed for everything anyways. You may
right.
as well-
Right. You're right. That's
Like, it's
also
all your
why.
fault, I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, it's all your fault. That's also why I like the item 19 that has a P&L for every location, because it tells an individual story that an average just misses. So this person spends more on labor. This person doesn't spend enough on marketing, and then they complain that their revenue isn't high. You actually start to see in that chart of accounts and through that P&L, it depicts the story behind the brand.
I think an emerging brand you could do. I can't do that with 700 locations.
Yeah. You can have a
My
700-page
FTD's
item 19.
already that thick.
It's true. He's got a more mature brand, but like it's
Nerds, I could do that.
you could, yeah. Brothers That Just Do Gutters, it's 47 pages long because it's
Yeah.
a P&L for every single one when it gets to the P&L
Something to be said for
section.
that, for sure.
But to your point, this goes back to your validation. If I sent somebody every P&L in the system, and they came back and they're like, I want to talk to this store, this store, and this store, and they were like the 3 worst stores, I probably wouldn't sell a franchise to that person. You want somebody to come back and say, I want to talk to these 3 people to see all the things they're doing right, so that I can do it. Like, I don't know, to me, that would be a much better
Gets you to that
candidate than
avatar.
somebody that's going to gravitate.
Yeah.
Because again, I know I'm heavy on metaphors, but your franchise system it's like middle school, right? You're going to have a bunch of little cliques, and you're going to have the rebels, and you're going to have the nerds, and you're going to have the overachievers, and it's like, so find which little clique you want those people to be in, and as they're gravitating towards that, then bring them on.
Another question?
I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's very insightful. You've kind of really opened our eyes to kind of the power of the item 19. I was wondering if you could actually speak to any experiences of unintended consequences with your item 19, where you, for whatever reason, there was a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the numbers that you were intending to present, or where you didn't communicate the story that you were looking to communicate.
Which is right where we're going next. So perfect question, perfect segue. Common mistakes, war stories. Where have you seen franchisors, especially merging franchisors, make some mistakes with their item 19 and the data they're presenting and how they're presenting, what they're saying, what they're not saying?
So the biggest mistake I see emerging franchisees make with their item 19 is you've been operating in a territory that's not realistic for a franchisee, right? So I've had my business operating in Philadelphia for 5 years, and I call it one location, right? But I'm covering all of Philadelphia, Delaware, Chester, Bucks, and Montgomery County. And so it's like, that's not one location. That's not a franchise territory for somebody. So you really have to break down the numbers of what you've been doing from your corporate single location and say, this is what, especially in services, but like for you, for you guys, it's the same thing. Like, you know, a franchisee isn't going to service somebody in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and King of Prussia. That's not a reasonable expectation, but you may have been doing that for the last 2 years. So you got to really break it down to like, this is what this would be a territory like what you would own, and this is what we do just within that area.
That's right. You want to make sure that your footnotes are very detailed. So all of these distinguishing characteristics are covered in the footnotes. So if you're basing it off of your flagship operations, and it's been in operation for 10 years, and it operates in a territory that's larger than what you're going to grant, and as you disclose in your item 12. Well, you need to talk about all of that in your item 19. You want to set the right expectation. You don't want people coming in, taking a look at your performance figure for a 10-year-old business, thinking maybe that's what you did in year 1. You don't have that ramp up. So if you don't have the luxury of having the data or the history for the ramp up to disclose, well, then you need to be very careful with what you are disclosing and how you're explaining the potential departures, special characteristics.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of mistakes in drafting and not articulating all of these important characteristics. You want to set the right picture. Honesty, transparency, setting the right expectations, so important.
And I would add to that, we talked about this a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
is it's all about training your team so you don't have surprises, so they know how to position it. We spend extensive time, every time it comes out, part of our sales process is a call to discuss the item 19 and to review it and have that conversation. But make sure your team knows what they're talking about, especially when you have what do I have, 14 pages?
11.
11. An 11-page item 19 for fast signs and different brands. I want to make sure they clearly understand and can explain it, because if they think they're interpreting it one way and that's not really how it means, then I think you could run into issues where somebody comes back and goes, no, that's not how I understood it, even though you footnoted it and it's clear. So I think the training of the team
is so important.
Is such an important part of it.
It's so important. You need to have legal involved with that
Yep.
because you have the item 19, it says what it says. You know, unless you have the legal training, you may think that you can say things that you can't say in the process, and so you need to have your people trained with the right legal counsel. So what is an item 19? It's historical. It is, in the past, something that these units achieved during this stated time frame. That's it. It is not a representation of what those units will do in the future. It is not a representation of what you can expect to achieve. Part of your due diligence is vetting the brand, the performance. This is part of that process, but you need to continue with that process on your own. So you need to make sure that your sales team is educated there. You don't want them taking item 19 and working with a prospect and plugging in numbers from item 19 into a spreadsheet to create their projections before they sign on the agreement, because that's an illegal financial performance representation. You can't do that. You're never going to be in a position where you're going to tell someone what they can expect to do. No one includes projections. That's just foolish to do. There's way too much liability exposure there. So you want to make sure that everybody's trained. At the end of the day, franchisor, you're responsible for what everybody says in the sales process. That includes your people, your employees, and it includes brokers, and it includes consultants. So you want to make sure you're working with a responsible and reputable team if you're working with brokers, and that ask them about their process. You train your people on what it means to have an item 19, how to use it, what to say, what you can't say. You can't go outside the scope of it. You can't put information in a sales deck that's not in the item 19. And franchisors, you need to be making sure that the teams that you're working with are doing all of those things. Because at the end of the day, you're holding the bag. And if there is an issue and a franchisee sues you, it may have been the third party that messed up, but you're the one that will be held responsible for
I
it.
secretly shop my team 3 or 4 times a year, and we record those calls and we review them. And as you said earlier, and we do that with some of our competitors, and I'm shocked at what sometimes competitors will say that I know isn't in the item 19.
Right.
And you mentioned that earlier.
Well, and in the item 19, when it comes to the points Ryan and JoyAnn just made about how mature is that business, and how many territories is that really? That was the corporate territory that covered 5 states, right? It's really easy. You just start with the chart, franchise 1, 2, 3, 4, the location, how many households or population, and opening date. And that's how the item 19 starts. So they see all of those details. So when they go down to the P&L and they see one outperforming another, they can see, well, this is a 3-pack that opened 10 years ago versus a single that opened a year ago. It's very, very different. And there really should be another column added to that I would recommend, and that is it semi-absentee or owner-operator? Because that's another thing that I see all the time is that these brands claim that this is semi-absentee, but then they don't put a manager salary in that item 19. And that hits these franchisees between the eye then, that very first meeting they have with the franchisor, and they find out that their expenses are going to look a little different than the item 19 did. But it was sold as semi-absentee.
When you're starting out, you forget you don't assign a royalty fee. That's another thing that really freaks people out.
Yeah.
Because you break down all your expenses, but you got to realize your franchisees are going to be paying 6% or 8% or whatever right off the top.
Yep.
But and have the discipline, like when you're selling. This is a true story. I got subpoenaed once, so I was the VP of development from a large company, and a franchisee was suing them, wanted to get out of their franchise agreement. And I was supposed to have to go and give my spiel because I sold the franchise. And the week before I was supposed to go, they called and said, we don't need you anymore, because in the discovery process, the guy had turned over on all of his notes. And in one of his notes, in big letters, he had written, Ryan said he can't talk about any financials that aren't included in the item 19. He literally had written that down in his notes. And so they didn't want to talk to me anymore.
Good job.
But yeah, you have if you really get that out there, there's some protection.
Could you reiterate when you have a 3-pack, when you have someone with a multi-locations, 2, 3, 4 locations, do you present them with 3 or 4, or rather P&L for each location, or do you present that as one P&L and footnote this is 3 locations?
We present the overall P&L, but we disclose how many territories is represented within that P&L. And sometimes, instead of disclosing the territories, to answer your question, we disclose the factor that determines the territory size. So if it's population, it's 200,000 per pop, we'll say this is 300,000 people or something, only because over the years we see that our brands sometimes will change and adjust their territory size. So it might have been a 2-pack when it was sold, but now it's a 4-pack because they've reduced the size of their territory. So instead, we'll disclose population or household count, so it's clear.
Some item 19s are organized single unit operators, multi-unit operators, so that you can see if there are advantages to multi-unit operation, if the revenues are higher. So you can present the data that way. You can get very creative with how you break it down.
You could do it by
on the show.
market. We've done it by market before, so like particular markets.
In Fast Signs, we have used to sell, we don't anymore, we had a satellite option where they could do a sales office that was non-production. We would break that out as well because the cost would be different and the factors would be different. So I think it's, the great thing about an item 19 is within the letter of the law, you can really break it out as much detail as you want, but I think making sure that if you have different models, really making sure you're accounting for that is important. We even have a co-brand model and a conversion initiative, and we break that out as well.
Another question in the back?
My question was, so I'm in Florida, and so we had one of the worst hurricanes hit us last year, a year ago today. And so 8 of our locations, all corporate, were closed for anywhere from 10 days to one hasn't opened yet, because it's still under build out. What's the best way to disclose that? Separating that out individually, or is it quite a range of like 10 days closed?
You could separate, so you're going to disclose the performance of,
Because it's not an accurate depiction because they got closed down.
right. You're going to
Like
footnote
basically
it.
everybody did what
Just like with
COVID.
COVID, exactly. So with COVID, we had to disclose the performance information, and it included the COVID period. So what we did was we showed the period, and maybe it's on a monthly basis so that you can capture what happened when the hurricane hit and when the units were closed, and then the ramp up from when they were able to reopen forward. So you just disclose, you could break it down in a little bit more detail, and then the footnotes, you can explain what happened.
And with like COVID, we did PPP loans,
Yep.
got broken out separately
Everything.
because that impacted the businesses in some cases.
Yeah,
so.
that was like a big item.
We've had the opposite too. We had a restoration brand that opened in Florida in the midst of a hurricane, and their numbers went. So you very much have to then train you and disclose.
So then you got to
clearly.
footnote that,
Yeah.
right? Why was the performance so high there? Well, that's because there was just this
Yeah.
hurricane there, and so maybe not, that's an important thing to
Right.
share.
Or it's
And
not reasonable
It's a
basis.
pretty reasonable thing to explain as well.
Right.
And so it's like, it's a 2-line deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but when you don't have it, then the picture that's created
Yeah.
2 years from now can look pretty ugly.
That's a change in item 19.
Explain, it's the explanation part of it, really, that, and we have a couple of years only in the activity, so
Did you have a question in the back too?
In item 20, you have three defined tables. But in item 19, it can vary, and it can vary based on the type of business. So what is best to define what those or the elements for item 19? Is it store? Is it
That's a great question. I think it's a collaboration between your sales team, your ops team, your legal team,
Finance.
finance.
What data you have and don't have.
I mean, when we do a new one for brands that we've acquired, we sit down with our legal team and say, these are the things we want to talk about.
Yep.
What are the
Then we
things
say,
that
no,
I can and how
you
do I
can't,
present
no.
that? Right. And what does it look
Nope.
like and what's the chart look like? Sometimes I'll frankly pull competitors. How are they presenting that information? And
That's
is there a
important to
benefit
do.
it?
Yeah, that's really
I
important
want
to
to
do.
look at those tables and then, but to me, it's as much going to be driven by legal is going to say, so I might go to them with, this is what I want to show, tell me how I can show it. And then
Because
if I
it
don't
is a
like the answer, I
sales
say,
tool.
but,
It should be looked at as a tool to sell a
Yes.
franchise or to grow. And so the key is, what JoyAnn said, it's putting it there. Like in my career, when I started in franchising, you didn't see a whole lot of item 19s. It
Right.
was, we don't share financial representation. But then what happened is that there were lawsuits and people were finding out that the reason Mark didn't have an item 19 is because it sucked, right? And so not putting it in there made you more liable than putting information in there that was bad, right? So you just,
No,
it's really
right.
about creating an accurate and honest depiction of
Yep.
what it is.
Yep.
But then you can still dive into parts of those numbers to help you in the sales process.
Yep.
I just want to double click, we'll come to you in a sec. I just want to double click on a point Ryan just made around understanding that it's really a tool for you to use to help you sell franchises. super important that you give it the time and attention, because there is so much flexibility around it, as you can hear. There's so many different ways to structure it. Just make sure that you are giving it the time and attention. I just remember in the early years, we'd kind of throw something together fairly quickly. In a couple of hours, we'd pop it out, whereas today, we involve the whole team. So we do have legal, we do have finance, we do have franchise development, all working together to create something really meaningful and impactful for the candidates that you're going to talk to.
And if you do it the right way, once you start putting because when you start out, you put so much time into like item 7 and item 6, and sometimes you don't have the information for item 19, but as you get going, you should use all this information you're gathering from item 19 to refine your item 6 and your item 7. Because if you're seeing our top 25% are spending more than what we're requiring in local marketing, or they're doing more of this or whatever,
Maybe
that
we wanna
should
bump
be
that
an
up.
indicator that, okay, well, maybe we should change our local marketing requirement, or maybe we should change this, and you can really use it to build out the rest of your item 19. It becomes the most important section.
We have a bunch of questions. I know you've had.
Alicia Visconti with Francer. I just wanted to say, I was on this panel. It's like probably to me the best panel in Springboard. And
I thought you were going to say the history of panels.
She meant that, Ryan. I know she did. Right.
Right, and so sometimes early emerging brands say, well, I'll get to it, and then they come into our system and wonder why they're not getting any leads, because my brokers typically do not work with you unless you have a
But be careful and work with counsel, because you don't want it to be the Wild West. And with the changes in the statement of policy and the restriction on the use of questionnaires and acknowledgments that nobody said anything outside of your item 19, your increased liability exposure. So make sure that you've got the right legal guidance in the preparation and educating your team on proper use.
So with the FTC going through the rulemaking process right now, and I know you guys being fantastic panelists, first, thank you so much. This is super helpful for everybody here. You guys have access to top secret sources. Are you hearing anything from these top secret sources regarding changes to the item 19, mandatory item 19s? Has there been any underpinning?
I don't think we'll wind up with a mandatory item 19. I don't think that we'll wind up with much movement on item 19. But what we have right now in the form of like NASA interpretations, maybe those are captured in the new rule, because right now it's their interpretation. The FTC rule doesn't say that you need to give the high, the low, the median, the percentage. That's interpretation from NASA, which it's not in the law, so it's not illegal to not have it, except you're not going to make it in this industry unless you do. So I think that they'll probably rope those kinds of things in, but I'm not hearing, but I don't really have a direct line, so I don't know if anybody else is hearing anything.
No, I mean, I will
different.
tell you that, like, you know, we're registered in every state for all brands, and so a lot of times we take the most strictest interpretation, which is the regulatory
Yes.
states, right? Even in the states I don't need to necessarily. So, I mean, I think, I mean, I've heard a lot of rumors of what's happening and what's gonna look like. And I met with the FTC at the New York show. They were meeting with franchisors, asking about what was important and what wasn't. But it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
You saw the recent, they removed disclosures, as you know, and there was always mention of item 19, and there were no earnings claims outside of what was disclosed in item 19. It impacted somewhat, at least it addressed the item 19, but it wasn't directly about what could and couldn't be reported. But we removed disclosures at that time.
The truth is it's I shouldn't say easily, but it's almost self-regulated, because if you lie in your item 19, like, that's going to be something that's pretty easy for somebody to prove if they want. Like, there's going to be banking records.
But it's usually not that, right? The claim usually isn't the information's false. The claim is
Misleading.
misleading,
Misleading.
right? That you intentionally presented this picture that didn't really exist, even if that information was correct, right? And that you Right. You
How
presented
it's-
it in a way that
how it's
duped me
presented,
into.
I think, is
Yeah.
key. Yeah.
Misleading.
I think we've got time maybe for one more. I just got the warning from Brad.
Just on your last comment there, then, in that spirit, then, what is the obligation for the franchisor to interpret the times, so to speak? I mean, you know your brand better than anybody else. You know the future of your brand looks like COVID, recession, whatever the case may be. What is your obligation then in the item 19 to communicate expectations?
To give an honest depiction of what.
But you're not presenting in item 19 what you think will happen in the future. This is historical. You're presenting what units did do. So going forward, you have a duty to know what's in your item 19, and if there's a material change that happens that's affecting the performance of the units that you shared information on or in the system, and that's no longer the picture, like what we saw with COVID, well, then you have a duty to pause, take a look at your item 19, and determine whether or not you need to amend it. Do you need to update the information to capture whatever the change is? But it's not a projection. It's not a prediction of what's going to happen in the future. It's historical. Does that answer your question? Okay, one last one.
As part of our onboarding, we ask candidates to look at our item 19, determine how many accounts, with our data, your area, how many accounts are you going to need? How many, look at our data and tell. it's basically
So,
projections.
right. Be careful with how you talk about that.
I think it's scary about that.
Yeah, I think, so what can you do? You can say, look, I can't help you prepare your business plan because the rules don't allow for me to do that. So what I can do is present to you this FDD. We've got a lot of information here. We have an estimated initial investment. Estimated, that word's there for a reason. It's an estimate. It's not what you can expect. Do your homework. Do your homework in your area. We're not there yet, so we don't know if there are maybe some differences. Take a look at our item 19. That's historical. That's what these units did do in the past. It's not a representation of what you're going to do, but that's part of your due diligence. That's part of your homework. It's information, right? Where else are you going to get information? Franchisees. Call our franchisees.
But you say onboarding. Are you saying somebody signed a franchise agreement? Oh,
Candidates.
because I have
I was
seen,
gonna ask for that,
I have
too.
seen,
Yeah.
there are brands
Yeah.
where you'll sign a franchise agreement
do a
and
business
before
plan.
they will take your money before that you come to training, you have to put a business plan together that looks, so it's a different scenario.
The rules
It's
are all
already
off once
signed.
they're-
Yeah,
yeah,
once
Rules are off.
Yeah.
Different concerns post-closing if you're working with them on prepping business plans. Different liability concerns. You're not dealing with this issue, other issues.
But you're playing with fire if you tell somebody, prepare your business plan and send it to me.
Don't do
and
it.
I'll take a look at it.
Don't
and
do
then
it.
Decide if we want to sell a franchise. Like, that's basically you stamping what their projections are.
Right.
I would never do that.
Don't help them prepare it. Tell them if they're going to do it, not to send it to you. You're not going to open the email to go right in the trash because you can't.
Don't prepare, don't have like a template. It's like, oh, you just put in the top line revenue and it'll flow. Like, I've seen people
Oh,
do
don't put
that,
the
too.
formulas in. You
Yeah,
could give a blank one and say, here's a blank one, but it's blank.
But make sure it's blank.
Yeah.
Make sure it's blank. Yeah.
But then don't look at it.
But they can't, you need to warn them because they're naturally going to send it back to you. So you need to tell them, don't send it back to me.
And tell them in an email.
In an email,
Yeah.
yes. So that in discovery, we can get the email and the subpoena will go away because you said all the right things in that email. Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for your attention. I hope it was helpful.